Hey guys, good morning. Less people are there. We'll wait for some time, guys. We'll wait for 5 more minutes till your friends join.
Yes, sir.
So, what chapter is going on in your schools, guys?
In our school right now, atomic structure, sir.
Atomic structure. Okay. How about other people? What chapter is going on? Is everyone from the same school? Whoever here. Pranav, Rohan, Shruti, Vanisha. And I think we'll start. So we have been saying we finished periodic table, if you can remember, right? So you will be soon writing a test on the periodic table also. Okay. So next chapter is chemical bonding, right? So this is where you understand a lot of stuffs within chemistry, like lot of insights, like how a bond is formed, how strong is the bond, what are other bond parameters, right? Again, it's like it's little history also, like atomic structure, like who proposed first theory, then the next scientist, right? Now what we are seeing, now what we are using, right? So all these things you'll be studying. Okay. So the chapter is okay. So the first question I'll ask right here is what is the bond? Right? We have to understand this term bond. We say a lot of times, right? OH bond, CCl bond, HH bond, all these things we say a lot of times, right? So tell me what actually comes to your mind when I say bond? James Bond. Tell me what comes to your mind when I say bond? Or at least what do you understand by the term bond?
A relationship.
A relationship. Okay, fine. Any other answers? Come on, guys. There are so many people. I know you're so sleepy. Please wake up. Tell me, what comes to your mind when I say bond? I'm not able to hear you, Kanna. No, I see that you're speaking something, but I'm not able to hear. No, I think there is some problem. Okay, fine. So when I say bond in chemistry, right? So it actually talks about, see, please understand, I'm going to have two atoms, right? Say I have two atoms A and B, right? Now I say that there's a bond formed between A and B, right? So what do you mean by this is that A and B are mutually attracted to each other, right? This A and B are mutually attracted to each other. So basically a bond speaks about the attractive force, existing between the atoms. It's very simple, right? So please understand that it is not actually a line which you draw. No, there is nothing going to be the kind of this stuff. A line which is getting drawn, that is not how it is, right? So this line, whatever we draw, the bond which we draw, actually represents the amount of force of attraction which exists between these two atoms. Okay, like you can understand that it is not necessarily that this bond should be in between atoms alone, right? Say I have a tumbler of water, right? I have a tumbler of water with me. So you can actually, if I give you the volume of that water, right? If I give you the volume of that water, so you will actually know how many moles of water are there, right? And if you know how many moles of water are there, you will know how many number of water molecules are there, isn't it? Now, please understand, I have individual H2O molecules, and all of them actually has to be together in order to form a big, a big mixture, isn't it? In the tumbler, I'll have so many millions and millions of water molecules, and all of them have to stay together, right? Now, there you will see two types of bonds. One is that I am obviously going to have a bond between hydrogen and oxygen. Again, there is going to be some attractive force. That's it. For now, just imagine that it is some attractive force which binds the atom together. That is what is called as a bond, right? Okay. Now, this is one kind of interaction, isn't it? OH bond, proper bond, chemical bond is there, right? But between two H2O molecules, also, I need to have some kind of force of attraction so that they will be able to stay together, isn't it? Right? They'll be able to stay together in that solution. Right? It's not only in this case. Say if I have air, if I have anything for that matter, carbon dioxide, whatever the type of substance is, right? So all these atoms or molecules have to exist together, right? So for them to exist together, there should definitely be some kind of force of attraction, right? So that force of attraction is what is called as a bond in chemistry, right? Okay, so we'll look more into it. What are the different types of bonds? How is it formed? All those things we'll see, right? So when I say bond in chemistry, right, I will be able to actually divide them into two basic categories, right? So bond can be of two types, right? So one are what are called as your primary type of bond, right? The other ones are what are called as secondary type of bonds. Okay, so we need to understand what is primary and what is secondary, correct? We'll go back to your Dalton's atomic theory, right? So can someone tell me what Dalton said regarding chemical reactions? What was the statement of Dalton regarding chemical reactions? Nobody knows, or still everybody is sleepy? What was the statement told by Dalton regarding chemical reaction? Chemical reaction.
Undergo a rearrangement.
Wonderful, at last. Yes. So he said that atoms are going to undergo rearrangement in case of a chemical reaction. Or if I little modify it, right? Obviously, you understand that in case of a chemical reaction, bonds are broken and new bonds are formed, isn't it? Say the reactant molecules' bonds are broken, and in the products, the bonds are formed, right? So if I speak about bond formation here, So I can actually take that idea from Dalton. He said that there is going to be some kind of rearrangement in the atoms, right? So at that time when he told, he didn't have actually any idea what exactly is the kind of rearrangement which can happen, right? But now actually I'll be able to tell you what is the rearrangement, where is the rearrangement happening. All these things actually can be told, right? So can you guess what is the rearrangement? Where is the rearrangement in atom is happening?
It happens to the electrons.
Very good. Yes. So in atoms, if they undergo a bond formation or a chemical reaction, there will be rearrangement in the electronic configuration of the atom, isn't it? Right? Say for example, we already know certain stuff. I know what is an ionic bond. I know what is a covalent bond. So basically what happens in an ionic bond? Electron is completely lost or electron is completely accepted. So obviously there is a change in the electronic configuration of the atom. Even in the case of your covalent bonds, I have mutual sharing of electrons. Again, there is a rearrangement in the electronic configuration of an atom. Okay. So now actually this primary and secondary is actually going to depend upon that rearrangement only, right? The rearrangement in the electronic configuration. Based on that only, actually I'll be able to classify bonds into primary and secondary, right? Okay, so what is that like exact idea? The thing is, it's all about what is the extent of rearrangement, right? What is the extent of rearrangement in the sense, right? You say in case of primary bonds, right? In case of primary bonds, you will see that it is I have 100% rearrangement in the electronic configuration, right? What do you mean by 100% rearrangement? It's like electron is completely out of the shell. There is a complete change in the electronic configuration of an atom. Obviously, we know octet rule, isn't it? So based on octet rule, every element wants to have 8 electrons in its valence shell. So accordingly, if at all I had only 7 electrons, after the bond is formed, I will have 8 electrons. Say if I had only 2, 8, 1 configuration, that 1 electron would have been lost and I would have had 2, 8 configuration. So there will be a complete 100% change in the electronic configuration in case of a primary bond, right? And in secondary, obviously it is not going to be 100%. It is just going to be a partial rearrangement of electronic configuration, right? It is going to be a partial rearrangement of electronic configuration, right? So even if you don't understand what exactly, obviously I think you would have understood what exactly is primary bonds, right? 100% rearrangement means electronic configuration is completely changing, right? Here in secondary, it is not going to be 100%. It is going to be only a partial thing. That means what? The electron is not completely lost. Like it is still a little inside the atom only, but it is not there in the. It is not there where it should be. That's what you need to understand, right? In case of secondary bonds, you have to understand that if it is an isolated atom, say, okay, we'll come back to that. So if I say isolated atom, right? If I say an isolated atom, right? So for this kind of atoms only, you will be able to speak about the electronic configuration, right? So what do you mean by isolated? Isolated atoms are the one which does not have any interaction with the neighboring atoms. Okay, so the same example I can take the example of water in a tumbler, right? So in that case, it is not an isolated atom. Why? Because there are millions and millions of water molecules together, right? So at that time, I will not be able to say it as isolated, right? Say if at all that particular atom is very far away from the cluster, there are so many atoms and this atom is very far away, right? Now this particular atom is what is going to be called as an isolated atom, right? So whatever you have seen, the electronic configuration, atomic size, electron gain enthalpies, ionization enthalpies, all these things are only for isolated atoms. Okay, fine. So when the atom is isolated, I'm talking about secondary bonds now. So when the atoms are isolated, the electron is there where it has to be. They're basically in the p shell or s shell or whatever it is, right? But here, when the secondary bond forms, right, the electron is not completely out of the atom, or say the electron is not completely accepted, but it is somewhere in between, right? It is not exactly lost, or it is not exactly inside, exactly in the place where it has to be. it is somewhat displaced, I would say, right? Anyways, you'll get more insight about the secondary kinds of bonds at the last last a few this thing of the chapter. We will not see it now.
Sir, can you say the exact definition for isolated atom?
Okay, take down isolated atom. I'll give you the definition. Isolated atoms are the atoms. Isolated atoms are the atoms which are free of any interactions, which are free of any interaction. Okay, that's the best way to put it.
Sir, so they'll be away from the nucleus, sir.
Hey, atom kulla than nucleus irukku. It is in the nucleus is inside the atom. How can atom be away from nucleus? Right? Correct or not?
Yes, sir.
Right. So it's not about away from the nucleus. It's away from other atoms. That's what you need to understand. Okay, fine. Okay, so now next we'll see what are all the types of primary bonds, which kinds of bonds comes under primary bonds. Obviously, so I would say these primary bonds are the actual bonds, right? These are the actual bonds, and these are not the actual bonds they see. They are different. They're a little different. Okay, so what are all the bonds? Say I can have ionic bonds, right? Or I can have something called as covalent bonds, right? Or I have something called as coordinate bonds, right? And lastly, I have something called as metallic bonds. So these four are the bonds, right? These four are the bonds which comes under primary: ionic, covalent, coordinate, and metallic bonds. Okay. So when I go here for secondary,
All are under which category, sir? Primary.
primary. Yeah. All these four are under primary, right? So when I go to secondary, say I can have, I don't know whether you know these names, but still you can just take it down. I have something called as Van der Waals force, and I have something called as dipole interactions, and I have something called as dipole ion interactions, and I have something called as hydrogen bonding. Okay, so all these are the different types of secondary bonds I have in chemistry. We'll see in depth what are these things, don't worry. Okay, just take down the names. So Van der Waals force, dipole interactions, dipole ion interactions, and hydrogen bonding. All these comes under secondary types of bonds. Okay, so now we'll concentrate first on primary bonds, and in primary bonds first we'll concentrate on ionic bond. Okay, so we already know what are all the things regarding ionic bonds, but still we'll look into it in a greater depth, right? Okay, so first we'll start with ionic bonds. Just give me a second, guys. I think there's some glare coming. Just give me a moment. Okay, so an ionic bond, I know. So basically, we have to account for the force of attraction, isn't it? So I say a bond is nothing but attractive force existing between two atoms, isn't it? Right. Okay, so in ionic bonds, I know what and all I have, right? So I have something called as a cation, right, which is a positive charge, and I know I have something called as an anion, right? Cations, anions. So I know cations are positively charged, anions are negatively charged, right? So now you can easily account for what kind of force of attraction I have. It is basically electrostatic force of attraction between the positive charge and the negative charge, isn't it? Right? So I have a full strong positive charge, full strong negative charge. Opposite charges attract, right? And obviously I'm going to have a very strong force of attraction. The best example would be NaCl. I have Na plus Cl minus, positive charge, negative charge, a very strong force of attraction to exist between sodium plus and Cl minus. Okay, fine. So we know what has to happen for a cation to be formed, what has to happen for an anion to be formed? So obviously for cation to be formed, electron is lost, isn't it? Right, electron, say sodium loses electron to form Na plus, right? Same way for anion, electron has to be gained. Obviously Cl will accept an electron to form Cl minus, right? So that's the thing, right? Now if I go for energy considerations, right? If I go for energy consideration, which conditions favor, right? Which conditions favor the formation of ionic bond, right? Say for example, if I have say sodium and carbon, right? Sodium and carbon, and say I compare it sodium and chlorine, right? Now if you look at this, sodium and chlorine can form an ionic bond, right? But have you ever seen sodium and carbon forming an ionic bond? No, right?
No, sir.
Can you come up with an explanation why this happens like this? I even told it is something in terms of energy. I'm asking, sodium and chlorine can easily form cation or anion to form an ionic bond, but sodium and carbon, sodium can form a cation, that is okay, right? But carbon is not going to form an anion, so definitely ionic bond cannot be formed, isn't it? So I'm asking why.
Carbon has 4 valence electrons.
Okay. So
It's tough for it to get 4 electrons. If it tries to take 4 electrons from sodium, it would be very difficult, and sodium will become highly unstable in the process.
so I can even have 4 sodium atoms if you want, if you say that's the problem, right?
What is the question, sir? Repeat it again, sir.
I'm asking sodium and chlorine. I know it can form an ionic bond, sodium chloride, Na plus Cl minus, correct? Can I do the same thing with sodium and carbon? Is the question. The answer is no. I already know that. So you would have never seen sodium and carbon forming an ionic bond. I'm asking why. So actually, you were coming up with the correct answer. Actually, I think it's Rohan, right? So yeah, it's because that I have 4 electrons. Okay, so what? I mean, 4 electrons in the valence shell, and I have to accept 4 electrons to form.
After rule, it doesn't satisfy.
After 2 will be satisfied. After 2 is satisfied, right? Carbon has 4 electrons in the valence shell. If it accepts 4 more electrons, it will become octet. Again, I'm telling, the clue is energy. Pranav, covalent, yes, carbon forms covalent bond. That's what I'm asking. Why carbon forms covalent bond and not ionic bond?
So they have same affinity for electrons, sir. So, yes, sir, they have same affinity for electrons, sir. So they like.
They have same affinity for electrons.
Yes, sir. So they cannot share the electrons, sir, in order to achieve it. Like.
Oh, please do not confuse. If it's sharing of electron, it's covalent bond, right? So that is not the case here. Okay. So guys, it's very simple. There are 2 energy considerations here, right? So one is the ionization energy. The other one is the electron gain energy or electron gain enthalpy. Is it not? Right? So what are the conditions? Like if I speak about the conditions favoring a ionic bond in terms of these 2, right? So you're speaking about conditions favoring formation of ionic bond, right? So what are all the conditions favoring the formation of ionic bond? Very simple. So first we speak about the cations, right? Now from cations, from the atom, I have to remove the electron to form a cation, isn't it? So now tell me, how should be the ionization energy? It should be high or it should be less?
Plus.
Less, isn't it? So it's all about how easily I can form the cation. As easy I can form the cation, as easy it is for me to form an ionic bond, isn't it? So the first condition for your for say if you go for cations, the atom should have less ionization energy. That means the energy required to take out the electron should be minimal so that it can easily form the cation. Isn't it? Okay, fine. Now when I go for anions, now anions, how is it formed? Anions are formed by atoms accepting electrons. Isn't it? Now, obviously the energy which I'm going to speak about here is going to be your, what is that? Electron gain enthalpy, electron gain energy. Now tell me, how should be the value, high or less? How do you define electron gain energy, guys? Tell me, how do you define electron gain energy?
The energy absorbed or released when an electron is added to the valence shell
Good.
of.
Good. Correct. Right. So now you told that energy can be accepted, or energy can be absorbed, or energy can be released. Which will bring in stability, Kanna? Energy released or energy absorbed?
Energy absorbed.
Energy released.
Okay, fine. It's actually energy released. Obviously, will is more favorable, or it's more stable. I already told you high the amount. If at all the amount of energy possessed by that atom is very high, that means it is less stable. Energy and stability are inversely related, isn't it? So obviously, to lower the energy, what will happen? The energy will be released by the atom so that it becomes more stable, right? So here, the anions which are there, if with the atom which is going to form the anion, to which if I add electron, energy should be released so that it becomes stable. And all that means what? Easily I'll be able to form the anion, isn't it? So here the condition is the atoms which are forming the anion should have high negative value of electron gain enthalpy. They should have high negative value of electron gain enthalpy. Obviously, why negative? In chemistry, I told you energy absorbed is positive, energy released is negative. The same term, like it's just the sign convention, right? So I should have high negative value of electron gain enthalpy, meaning that it can easily accept the electron to form an anion, and obviously the ionic bond also can be easily formed, right? So these two are the conditions for favoring an ionic bond formation, right? So the atom forming the cation should have very less ionization energy so that I'll be able to easily take out the electron, right? And the atom which is going to form the anion should have high negative value of electron gain enthalpy so that it can easily form the anion and so easily the ionic bond. Okay, right? Fine. So this is the conditions, right? Now next thing what we'll see is what is it? We'll see the properties of ionic bonds, right? Okay. We're going to see the properties of ionic bond. Okay. Now, actually, I can give you one more condition also for formation of ionic bond. Actually, you can take them as the third point. The third point is the electronegativity difference. We know what is electronegativity. It is the ability of the element to attract a shared pair of electron towards itself, or it is the affinity for the electron, isn't it? So the electronegativity difference between the bonding atoms in your ionic bond should be very high. For example, if I take sodium and chlorine, right? Now sodium is highly electropositive, right? And chlorine is highly electronegative. See, I am not speaking about the electronegativity. I'm speaking about the electronegativity difference between the bonding atoms, right? So can I say that here I have high electronegativity difference, very high electronegativity difference. So again, this is actually a condition for formation of ionic bond, right? Actually, I will tell you the delta En, that is the change in electronegativity, that is the difference in electronegativity between the bonding atoms, should be greater than 1.7. Only then ionic bond is formed. Actually, you don't have to know all this. Just telling you. This information is extra, right? So whenever the difference in electronegativity between the bonding atoms is greater than 1.7, right, that constitutes an ionic bond. Okay, so this is another information. Okay, so when I go to the properties of ionic bonds, right, now please understand, in case of an ionic bond, I have a very strong force of attraction, isn't it? I have a very fully positive charge and I have a full strong negative charge, and the attractive force existing between them is what is called as an ionic bond, isn't it? Right? So these bonds are very, very, very strong. These bonds are very, very, very strong. So because of that, mostly they are solids. Mostly they are solids, right? So have you ever seen an ionic compound being a gas or a liquid? You wouldn't have seen, right? They are mostly 99.99%. They will actually be, what is that, in solid state. Okay, because of this very strong force of attraction. Okay, fine. Next, they will have very high melting and boiling points. They will generally have very high melting and boiling points. Right. So again, why this is again because of very strong forces of attraction between the cation and the anion. Right? They have very high, they have to supply a lot of temperature for them to undergo phase transition. Correct? Right? They have very high boiling points and melting points. Okay, next. They have high solubility in water. They have high solubility in water. Okay. Now we have to understand this, guys. Like why is it that ionic compounds are highly soluble in water? Okay, fine, cool. So the thing is, I know for fine. So the thing which you have to remember for solubility, right? The thing which you have to remember, I'm going to give you a phrase, right? I'm going to give you a phrase which you're going to remember. Okay. So that phrase is like dissolves like. Like dissolves like. Now it's actually a very famous statement, and this is a statement which you'll be studying in a 12th class also. There's a chapter called as solutions, right? So anyways, so what do you mean by this? Like dissolves like, right? Now let me put a question like this. Okay, say I have salt, I have sodium chloride salt with me, right? So that sodium chloride salt, if I put it in water, I know it will completely dissolve, correct? Right? But the same sodium chloride, or say the table salt, if I put it in petrol, or if I put it in oil, right, you will see that it is not going to get dissolved, right? But say I take grease, you know what is grease? The lubricant, right? I'm going to take some grease, right? And if I put it in water, right, you will see that it is not going to get dissolved, right? But the same grease, if I put it in petrol, you will see that it is actually getting dissolved, isn't it? Right? So why do you think all this is happening? Certain things are dissolved in certain solvents, and some certain things are not, right? They dissolve in some other solvent, right? So how do we come up with an explanation for this? Is with the help of the statement, like dissolves like. Now if there is one type of substance, if there is one type of solvent, right, that particular type of solvent will dissolve, that particular type of solute will dissolve only in that particular type of solvent, right? If I have, say, X type of solvent or X type of solute, those two only can form a solution. That means only then they will dissolve, right? But if I have different natures of the solute and solvent, they are not going to get dissolved, right? Then you can think, sir, how many types are there? You don't have to worry. There are only two types, right? Now there are two types. One is what is called as polar substances, and the other one is what is called as non-polar substances, right? Polar and non-polar.
So is this a property?
No, I'm talking about why they have high solubility in H2O. It's good to know this actually. kind of questions can be asked. Okay. Anyways, so what do you mean by polar compounds? What do you mean by non-polar compounds is the question now, right? So again, it's all about the difference in electronegativity, right? Okay, before that, so what you have to understand is if I have a polar solute, right, that will dissolve in a polar solvent. If I have a non-polar solute, it will dissolve in a non-polar solvent. That's what means by like dissolves like. Right, polar solute, polar solvent, non-polar solute, non-polar solvent. If I put the polar solute in non-polar solvent, it is not going to dissolve. Okay, fine. Now please understand this ionic compounds are highly polar compounds, right? Ionic compounds are highly polar. Now what do you mean by this polar compounds? Now, please understand it comes from the electronegativity difference between the bonding atoms. Okay. So, wherever you see charges present, whenever you see a positive charge, negative charge, all these are actually polar substances. So, obviously, in case of, so basically, your polar substances means I'm going to have some separation of charges. Polar substances means I will have some separation of charges. Separation of charges into positive, a neutral thing, separating into a positive charge and a negative charge, right? That is what is called as a polar molecule or a polar substance, right? So I obviously know in case of ionic compounds, I have a full positive charge, full negative charge. So definitely your ionic compounds are highly polar molecules, right? Okay. Now, this separation of charge, or say we saw in case of ionic compounds, it is fully positive and fully negative, right? But sometimes you need not have always this full positive and full negative. Even if you have partial positive and partial negative, even if you have partial positive and partial negative, that also constitutes the polarity. For example, water is the best example I can take. Say now if I take water molecule, I have H2O molecule here, right? Or I'll give you a better example, right? So how do you understand this polarity? Okay. Say I consider HH bond, HCl bond, and say I consider ClCl bond. I have three kinds of bonds here, right? HH, HCl, and ClCl. Okay. Now we are going to understand which of these bonds are polar. Right. Now understand this. When if at all you need to have polarity, if you need to have polar compounds, there should be high difference in the electronegativity bond in the bonding atoms, just like how I told you for ionic compounds. One of the conditions for it to form ionic bonds, right? So for ionic bonds, I need to have a very high difference. For ionic bonds, I need to have a very high difference in electronegativity because I need to form full positive and full negative, right? But I told you in case of polar compounds, it is not necessary that I need to have a full positive charge or a full negative charge. So even a small difference in electronegativity will do good, because I'm going to have only partial positive or partial negative. Okay, fine. Anyways, now we'll see which of these bonds are polar, right? Okay. Now if I look at H2 molecule, I know that there is an electron pair shared here, isn't it? One electron comes from one hydrogen, another electron comes from another hydrogen, isn't it? Right? So now I'm going to check where exactly the electron density is maximum, right? Where exactly the electron density is maximum. So obviously you will see that the electron density is maximum in the center of these two nuclei, isn't it? So this is going to have an atomic nuclei, this is going to have a nuclei, right? The electron density, that is, I'm talking about these two electrons, right? Now these two electrons, where it will be present? It will be exactly present at the center of these two atoms nuclei. Okay, right? Fine. Same goes. Okay, fine. Now if I look at this bond, that is HCl bond, right? Now I already know chlorine is more electronegative than hydrogen, isn't it? Chlorine is more electronegative than hydrogen, isn't it? Now what will happen then? Now I have electron again, two electrons shared here, one electron coming from hydrogen, one electron coming from chlorine, right? Now if I check where is the electron present, where the electron density is maximum, you will not see that it is going to be at the center. Just like previous case, right? Where I saw it, I saw that the electron density is maximum at the center of these two nuclei, isn't it? But in this case, no, you will not see that it is going to be the center. actually this electron pair will be more and more towards chlorine. It will be more and more towards chlorine. Why? Because chlorine is more electronegative, right? So you will see that this electron cloud will be more and more towards chlorine and away from hydrogen. Okay, so because of this, what will happen? Now, if the electron cloud is in the center of these two nuclei, there will not be any charges induced, right? Because electron is at the center, right? This side and this side, no charge, right? But if the electron cloud is more and more towards chlorine, right, and electrons are negatively charged, so can I say that the chlorine is going to have a partial positive charge, sorry, partial negative charge, isn't it? So I will be able to represent the HCl bond like this. Now, since this electron cloud is more and more towards chlorine, electron cloud is more and more towards chlorine, chlorine is going to have a partial negative charge, right? And since electron cloud is moving away from hydrogen, this is going to have a partial positive charge. So now you see, it's not an ionic bond actually, it's actually a covalent bond, right? But in the covalent bond itself, due to the difference in electronegativity, between the bonding atoms, and since the electron cloud is moving more and more towards one particular atom, right, I see a separation of charge happening, right? A del positive, that is a partial positive, and a del negative, that is a del partial negative, and the partial positive charge are getting separated. Now, these kinds of bonds are what are called as polar bonds, or say it is called as polar molecules. Okay, now look at this and tell me Cl-Cl bond, whether it's polar or non-polar. Tell me. I have a chlorine-chlorine bond.
Sir, can you again say what is polar, non-polar, sir?
Okay, no problem. Fine. So we'll take this example, H2, right? So we know that H2, the bond is a covalent bond. I understand that because electrons are shared between two hydrogen atoms, right? So I'm telling, okay, if I explain it, diagram. Say assume that these two are the hydrogen atoms. Okay, these two are the hydrogen atoms. So there are electrons shared here. So I'm telling that if this is the center of this nuclei, right, the electron cloud is actually going to be at the center of these two nuclei. It is going to be situated at the exact center of these two nuclei, right? So because of that, there is no positive charge, there is no negative charge, because it's the exactly center. Say distance from here to here and distance from here to here is same, right? But if I take HCl, hydrogen atom, chlorine atom, so say I have a bond here. Again, same thing, one electron is shared, another electron is coming from chlorine, all that. What I'm telling is, now this is the center, right? This is the center of these two nuclei, but you will see that the electron cloud is not there in the center. It will be more and more towards chlorine. It will be more and more towards chlorine. Now this is chlorine atom, this is hydrogen atom. Okay, it will be more and more towards chlorine. Why? Because chlorine is more electronegative than hydrogen, right? So because of this, what is going to happen? Now, if it is the center, there is no charge because the distance are equal, right? But here, since chlorine atom is more closer to a negative charge, chlorine atom is going to get a partial negative charge, right? And this hydrogen atom, the electron cloud is moving away from hydrogen atom. So if negative charge moves away, what will happen here? This is going to get a positive charge, isn't it? So here I'm going to have a del positive. So whenever you see there is a del positive and del negative coming into the picture, or say these are partial charges, or even if I have full charges, like in the case of ionic compounds, right? Now those kinds of compounds are what are called as polar molecules or polar bonds. Okay, now that is not happening. So H2 is a non-polar bond, but HCl is a polar bond, right? H2 is H bond is a non-polar bond, but HCl bond is a polar bond. Understood? Now tell me what happens to Cl-Cl bond?
Polar, non-polar.
Non-polar. Again, I'm telling, it is not about the electronegativity. Chlorine is highly electronegative, isn't it? So I have this coming.
Sir, so HCl is polar, non-polar, sir?
HCl is polar. Wherever you see the separation of charges happening, it is polar. Okay, right. So when I take this Cl-Cl bond, both are chlorine atoms now. Now say this is the center. right? Now this chlorine atom will try to pull the electron towards this side because it is highly electronegative, and obviously this chlorine atom also will try to pull the electron towards itself. So net change is 0. So that means what? The electron cloud is actually at the center only. Is it not? So please understand this. It is not about the electronegativity. It is about the electronegativity difference between the bonding atoms. It is about the electronegativity difference between the bonding atoms. Understood? So again, Cl-Cl bond is a non-polar bond. Cl-Cl bond is a non-polar bond. Okay, fine. So why we started all this is because we need to understand why ionic compounds are highly soluble in water. Right. Now we understood that ionic compounds are polar because they have separation of charges, a full positive charge, a full negative charge. And I'm telling that since these are polar, they will dissolve only in polar solvents. And the best example I can have is water. Right. Now we'll try to prove how water is also a polar molecule. Okay, we'll try to prove that water is also a polar molecule. How will we prove? Very similar way. I have hydrogen, I have oxygen. Oxygen is more electronegative. Right, so I have this one, 2 bonds. Right, so again, oxygen is highly electronegative, hydrogen is not electronegative. So what do you think will happen? This electron cloud which is here, right, will be more and more towards oxygen. And since electron cloud is moving away from hydrogen, obviously there is going to be a partial positive on this hydrogen, partial negative on this oxygen, because electron cloud is moving towards oxygen because it is more electronegative, right? But again, this hydrogen will have a del positive. The same thing is happening. Both these are hydrogen atoms, and that is an oxygen atom being highly electronegative.
Sir, so if the atoms, for example, if it is HH, ClCl,
Okay.
the same atoms, it is polar, and if the atoms are different, means non-polar.
Hey, you're telling exactly opposite. If there are same atoms, it is non-polar because there is no
Yes, sir,
separation of
yes,
charge.
sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
So if I have different atoms, it is polar. Yes.
So the opposite.
Okay. Correct. So you understood how water is a polar solvent, right? Because I have the separation of charges happening here, right? So since water is a polar solvent and ionic compounds are highly polar, they will have high solubility in water, right? Guys, everybody understood what do you mean by polar and non-polar? Please give me a yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fine. I think everybody understood. Again and again, I repeat, it is not about the electronegativity. If you see that one electronegative atom is there, don't decide. It is polar. You should look at both the atoms, right? If both the atoms have some difference in electronegativity, yes, then I can have some separation of charge, and that brings in polarity. Okay, right. So we understood why ionic compounds are highly soluble in water. Okay, so we'll continue with the properties of your ionic compound. Is the time? Okay, we have time. Cool. So next is they have very high lattice energy. Again, this is in new term, isn't it? Lattice energy. Okay, we'll look into it. Right. So first, you have to understand what is a lattice. Right? What is this term? Lattice. Right? So take the definition, guys, for lattice. Lattice denotes the crystal structure of an ionic compound. Lattice denotes the crystal structure of an ionic compound. Very simple, right? So basically, lattice means structure. That's it. So you obviously know all these ionic compounds are going to be in crystalline forms, right? So that crystalline form, the structure of the crystalline form, is what is called as your lattice. So lattice means basically the structure, the shape of the crystal. That is what is called as lattice, right? So obviously you can understand what do you mean by lattice energy then. Obviously lattice energy is the energy required to break the lattice. right? Lattice energy is the energy required to break the lattice, right? You can even take that down. Lattice energy is the energy required to break the lattice. That is, break the structure, break it completely. Okay, right. Now, how do I denote it? Right? How do I represent it? Now, it's very simple. Say, for example, I have this compound NaCl, right? Now, this NaCl is in the solid form. This is in solid form. No problem, right? Now, if I supply lattice energy to them, they will just become Na plus and Cl minus. Now, please understand, Na plus and Cl minus here are together as a solid form. Now, if I supply lattice energy, I am going to take away the sodium and chlorine far away from each other, right? So that energy is what? Obviously, the structure is lost, isn't it? The crystal structure is lost. Obviously, that energy is what is called as lattice energy. Okay. Now, look at the property. I'm telling that. So, please understand, lattice energy is only for solids. We cannot speak about lattice energy for liquids or gases, right? This is only and only for solids. Right? It is only for solids, right? So I have different types of solids. So what I'm telling is that ionic solids, ionic compounds will have generally very high lattice energy. Why? Again, the same reason. It is because the strength of the bond, that is the ionic bond which is getting formed here, is very, very high, right? The strength of the bond is very large, and that's why we have to supply a lot of energy. To break it, right? The energy required to break here, it is very, very high because the strength of the bond is very, very high. Very simple. Okay. Now, if at all I want to compare, say I want to compare NaCl's NaCl's lattice energy with NgCl2's lattice energy, right? What do we do? Now, I'm going to give you some terms. So this lattice energy is directly proportional to the product of charges. I would say it is directly proportional to the product of charges, right? And it is inversely related to the size. Okay. Now you don't have to actually remember this. Now it's very simple, right? Now I want to know in which case NaCl as well as NgCl2, in which case it is tougher to break the lattice, and whichever is tougher will have more lattice energy, isn't it? Right. Now look at here, I have +1 charge and -1 charge here and here, that is for sodium and chlorine. Here I have +2 and -1. Okay. Now look at this and tell me, where will I have a stronger interaction? Where will I have stronger force of attraction? NaCl or NgCl2?
MgCl2.
Exactly, because I have two +2 the charge and -1, so definitely the attractive force between +2 and -1 will be very high when compared to -1 and +1, isn't it? So that's what I told you. Lattice energy is directly proportional to the product of charges. Like again, obviously magnitude, because I have a negative charge also, right? So it is all about the magnitude of product of charges, right? And it is inversely related to the size. For example, okay, we'll take more examples for this. Okay, say I have magnesium chloride and aluminium nitride. Which do you think will have more lattice energy?
Aluminum nitride.
Very good, because here I have +3 and -3 for the aluminium and nitrogen. Here it is +2 and -1 for this thing and chlorine. So here in this case MgCl2, here in this case Aln3, that is aluminium nitride, will have, oh it's Aln, I'm sorry guys, Aln. Okay. So Aln, so that will have more ionization, lattice energy. Okay. Now let me compare LiCl, NaCl and KCl. Okay, now tell me, which will have, arrange them in the order of lattice energy. Now all charges are same, +1 -1, +1 -1, +1 -1, right? So whenever you see this kind of cases, you have to go for the size, right? Now I'm telling, whenever I have small size, whenever I have a smaller size, that means higher lattice energy. It is understood, right? So when I have as small as the atom gets, right, the interaction between the atoms are very, 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 very strong, right? The interaction between the like, I will put it like this. Okay, say I have two lean guys, right? When I have two lean guys, and say they hug each other, they hug each other. So obviously, how close they are, I'll compare it with two fat guys hugging. So where do you think it's better? Obviously, when I have two lean guys hugging, that force will be a little higher. Don't think like fat guys will be very strong. No, I'm not talking about that, right? I'm telling that like when they hug each other, how much area is in contact, right? Obviously, when two lean guys hug each other, there the force is very high because they are very much in contact, right? But in case of little fatter guys, like it will be very difficult, isn't it? So obviously, that's why I say that size and lattice energy are inversely related, right? Now tell me, which is the answer?
LiCl has highest.
Exactly. So
KCl has
LiCl has
lowest.
highest, correct, right? LiCl, NaCl, and KCl because Li plus is the smallest, and then comes Na plus, then comes K plus. Down the group, what happens? Size increases, right? So Li is the smallest, and then Li is the highest value, and KCl has the lowest value of lattice energy. Okay, right? So this is about the properties of ionic bonds, and this is how ionic bonds are formed. All the properties, all those things we saw. This is very simple. Ionic bonds are very easy. Okay, so next class we'll be seeing about your covalent bonds, and that is actually pretty high. Lot of stuffs, lot of theories, lot of scientists discoveries, right? So how is it formed? All that we'll see. Tomorrow is actually going to be an interesting class. Okay, actually not only tomorrow, next 4-5 classes will be actually very interesting. Okay, so guys, any doubts? You learned a lot of new things today. So please, again, sometimes go through it whenever you are free, right? It is actually going to help you. A lot of insights we got about what are ionic compounds, how ionic bonds are formed, how can we determine the strength of the ionic bonds, obviously with the help of lattice energy, right? And why certain things are soluble in certain substances are not soluble in some other things. Polarity, all these are the new terms which you saw, right? So please go through it. Okay, and you can start solving your book back exercises of periodic table. You can start solving book exercises of periodic table, and if you have any doubts, you can put it in the group, right? I'll be able to help you. Okay,
Okay, sir.
fine, right? Thank you guys, we'll see you again
Thank you,
tomorrow.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. One second, I think there is a new guy today. Oh, everybody